Good morning, Carlee.
Good morning.
You mentioned during our intro chat that adaptive sports are often built off the grid with no roadmaps, just people committed to showing up and building access where there was none. So that's really stayed with me.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think it's an important one to talk about because you have a lot of very passionate people and communities out there making it work for all different reasons. So it has stuck with me as well, and a reason why I've stayed in that service.
Great. Can't wait to unpack with you all that. Let's dive in. The following is a conversation with Carlee Wolfe, a leader in adaptive sports coaching and purpose-driven performance. This is Pre-Zero Sports Talk podcast, and I'm your host, Sid Bensala. Today, we explore the intersection of sports, leadership, and access, and covering real stories and insights that matters. To support our show, please check the episode description. Carlee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, your career has spanned Olympic and Paralympic spaces, grassroots programs, boardrooms, and nonprofits. And
Right.
through it all, you've carried this consistent thread of purpose, leadership, and bold inclusion. Let's start there. When was the first moment you realized that adaptive sport wasn't just about athletics, it was about building something much deeper?
Mm. I think for me, I've always seen the power of sport and community, and I think adaptive sports definitely expands into that. But if I were to think back on maybe a particular moment to your question, it was probably actually when I was working at USA Volleyball, or just coming out of working at USA Volleyball, excuse me, and working at the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. What I was just moving into is working in leadership development. And when I was at the USOPC, we used sport to teach different sort of like leadership principles and skills and attributes. And oftentimes what we tried to pick were sports that were less known to others, right? Because if you're wanting to teach leadership skills or something new, it helps to have an even playing field. In other words, if I brought you to a program and I said, we're going to play basketball, learn about leadership, but you're a great basketball player, you're probably more interested in playing basketball and getting into the game versus, hey, what's sort of like the real root of what I'm taking out? And so I share this because we use a lot of adaptive sports, things like goalball, which is for visually impaired athletes, things like sitting volleyball, which is where I got some introduction to it. But let me go back to goalball for a moment, which is I encourage people to check the sport out. We would use goalball to teach listening skills, because if you can't see, how do you rely on your other senses? And in that, we would see these like profound moments of people connecting not just with the sport, but with one another in different ways, right? In that case, it was about our senses, but I think it was also about that shared experience, doing something new, struggling to learn, to fall, literally falling on the court
Right.
and having those laughs together. And so that's the stuff. That's when I knew it wasn't just about like performance or elite athleteism. It's really about that sense of community, like impact on people's lives,
Yeah.
health, all of the above. So I'd say like that to me, while I've had like smaller moments probably throughout my life, I really, just when you asked that, that's like immediately where I went and what connected with me.
Yeah. So you worked with USA Sitting Volleyball. What's the current state of the sport now?
Yeah, I do. So I worked with USA Sitting Volleyball early in my career in when I was doing coaching education, but now I work with them in their pipeline program. So help support athletes who maybe have never been exposed to the sport, had some exposure to the sport, but they have athletic potential to be able to train in the pipeline program and maybe have hopes one day of making the national team. So that's a little bit of my background. But where's the sport? I think the sport's an amazing place. I think in particular on the women's side, right, just across the board, you're seeing women's sports on the rise, which is incredible, especially in the United States. A lot of investments going in. So that's just women's sport in general. I think the sitting volleyball game, both on the men's and women's side, is growing. The pipeline opportunities for athletes coming in has only grown in the years that I've been in there, and really, really expanded in the past couple. You're seeing some great young talent coming in. Paris Olympics, you just saw the women return for gold.
Yeah.
We have LA Paralympics coming up here in the United States. A great opportunity for both teams to participate and have and show for country pride, but really, I think, be able to show kind of their next chapter of performance. The last thing I'll share is I think Paralympics is in a growing space. Paris Games did a phenomenal job as a host city, being able to integrate both Olympics, Paralympics, and showing the power of sport, community, and really elite performance. And so I think that propelled the sport forward, including things like additional broadcasting rights, where people can have access to the sport like they never had before. So I think it's in a great spot. We certainly still have room to grow. And I think it's important conversations like this to continue to provide exposure, get people excited, involved. And there's just so many ways to do that. So it starts from the bottom up, and including our fans.
Absolutely. Well said, Carlee. What does talent identification and development look like in adaptive programs?
In some ways, it's not a whole, depending on the sport, in some ways it's not a whole lot different from a non-adaptive sports program. But if I just talked a little bit more specifically, well, I guess maybe two angles. So one is I do some community work here in Baltimore, Maryland. I work with an organization called Kennedy Krieger Institute, and they do adaptive sports programs. They range everything from athletics to sledge hockey to pickleball to basketball, right? Name the sport, they have an adaptive version of it. And then the other exposure I have is through USA Volleyball. So I'll kind of give you two answers to that. One is you have from the grassroots level, for example, like a Kennedy Krieger, who is working with athletes from the start, right? Maybe they're 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. They're just getting exposed to sports for health, for connection, for friendship, all of these things that we all go enjoy sport for. In those programs, they might start to identify or see some athletes who are excelling. And I think that's when you start to get them exposed to, whether it's continue through a program like Kennedy Krieger Institute or beyond that, which is to get them exposure to competition nationally, internationally, where they can compete. So I think it starts there. But what I love about a lot of the times these more community adaptive sports programs is the exposure to so many sports, right? You're not hyper specializing like you might see let's just use, for example, like basketball. Somebody could specialize as early as 10 years old. Like that's the only sport they're doing. But in the adaptive world, I think, if they're especially getting involved in community, it stays quite diverse for a while. So that's one pipeline area and where people can get involved. If I were to talk then, explain that from the USA Volleyball side, one, like there is the community aspect, right? You have people who run programs and can identify talent. I think it's also the USA Volleyball program, the staff, volunteers, people passionate about the sport, who are involved in programs around the country, who see athletes coming in for recreation, for maybe they're making, pivot in life and kind of researching for their purpose, whether that's Kennedy Krieger Institute, it's in sport or community. And having those, again, volunteers, people out in the communities, people involved with USA Volleyball, identifying and seeing this talent. I think people also hear about it, right? They float into their own communities and connections. We have a lot of athletes, especially on the men's volleyball side, who have been exposed to other adaptive sports, things like bobsled. I'll just give that as an example. Who maybe they're a winter sport athlete and then they come over to the summer sport. So those are a few examples. And so really the pipeline's quite diverse. And I think, that's one of the areas that is continuing to grow is this more, we'll call it like elite pipeline, where you do have athletes who are already playing the sport who are now kind of moving into that next step. Whereas maybe 15 years ago, we were probably taking a lot more athletes from, hey, like you look like you could be athletic, or maybe you're at your brother's, soccer game. How would you like to get involved? We'll teach you the sport of volleyball. So it's definitely changed over the years, but it's been fun, and it's only growing.
Yeah, fantastic.
So if anyone knows anyone out there, sees a great volleyball athlete, or has anyone in conversation, I would encourage them to reach out.
Yeah, great. You said that the community programs are quite good and listening to you, it sounds like you've done a huge progress. Do you see any hidden challenges or barriers athletes face even after they make the team?
Yeah, I think, athletes face all kinds of challenges at every stage of their athletic journey, as one does in life, right? There are those things that get thrown at us that are the unexpected, right? Health
Mm.
challenges, family emergencies, all that sort of good stuff. We'll call it life. That happens and challenges us in that. I think, depending on the athlete and also their journey in, I'll just call kind of their physical journey, right? Some athletes come to us from injuries, as an example, and in the journey of recovery, sometimes you're really kind of figuring it out. Maybe you had your leg amputated, 6 months, a year prior, and you're just still figuring it out. What does it mean to
Mm.
reorient myself in the world in a different way? Sometimes that comes with additional surgeries, additional medical needs. That's an avenue in which can come up from something that the athletes are working through. I think training in a more elite gym can be an adapt or a place to kind of learn, which is the expectations are higher, the commitments to the programs are higher. Where once were maybe from a recreational standpoint there to just connect and make friends. At the elite level, you're there to compete and to be the best that you can, and that is obviously what is a driver. Also, sometimes that's what's tough, right? You're not there in the same friendly, connected environment. So
Yeah.
those are a couple of aspects, everything from like the personal like life journey to the adaptation to the sport. Then that includes like yourself and the people around you. But I think those are all uh, things that come up and show up in individual ways that can get there. I think another very real thing, and I know that we're going to talk about this sort of like barriers to access to the sport in general, is also just like funding, right?
You're
Oftentimes,
right.
especially
Yeah.
at these elite levels, these athletes, it's a huge commitment, and they still need to carry full-time jobs or full-time students or full-time life, fill in the blank, mothers, fathers, and that's a balance in trying to figure it out and get what you need. So I think that's another very real thing in the sport. And that also starts from the beginning, right? Community programs being able to get funding to support programs for people to be able to get
Mm.
access and play. So
Yeah, indeed.
funding and support's definitely one of them.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very familiar with the concept of coaching the whole person as a former Olympic coach. What does holistic coaching look like in adaptive sports space?
I think holistic coaching in adaptive sports is very much like holistic coaching, broadly speaking. I think, what are the goals the team's trying to achieve? Where does that individual athlete play a role in that team's outcomes? What is that individual's journey that they're on and the goals that they're having? And how do they get there? What are the challenges they're going to face? What are the key attributes and leadership skills that are important? Things like having empathy, being able to actually set goals and work against those goals, teamwork. And teamwork, I say very broadly, but at things like, how do I have a difficult conversation so that it's effective? How do I raise concerns and communicate key things that I need? So I think the holistic person, by the way, is a huge aspect for success, right? We have we'll call it like on the court game, the majority of what everybody sees in action, and obviously is the execution of the sport. But so is mind, your body, like the shape of your body, how you're thinking about recovery, how
Hmm.
you're training outside of the gym, right? The best way that you can sort of prepare your body. And that also comes with what you're asking, the holistic person, the leadership attributes, how I orient myself in the world. As you move into more elite positions, it's also how are you engaging on social media? How are you talking and showing up in international competition? How are you when you're traveling, actually connecting with other cultures and having meaningful experiences? So these are all the things that are a part of the journey. And by the way, what I think is so special about anyone committing to an elite sport, because you have these different unique skills and experiences and worldly connections that play into the sport that are like no other. I think there's
Yeah.
also an aspect of, in our case, it's about representing the United States of America, and what does that mean in international competition, and who you want to be as a person? Like, how are you showing up and demonstrating sports personship as an example? Appreciating, if you think about the Paralympics, it's all, and Olympics for that matter. Yes, it's about elite competition. It's also about the movement and growing in sport and bringing people along. So those are things you can choose to represent or be a part of or not. These are all choices, and that's part of the holistic people journey as well. So love that question, because it's big, it's complex, it's individualistic, it's also team oriented, it's culture oriented, it's country oriented. There's a lot of layers there.
Yeah, indeed, there is so many layers, and it's interesting. We spoke earlier about the financial aspects, and then you mentioned how do you show up your presence on the digital platforms in terms of growing or boosting your audience and things like that. So when we talk about coaching the whole person, not only from mental and physical aspect, but as well from the financial aspect and the digital presence, it's kind of an avenue for a revenue stream, a different in terms of looking for new sponsors, partners, etc., etc. And I guess because I see it here in Scandinavia, it's quite tough to secure funding, mainly to get sponsors for top athletes. Talking about adaptive sport, each discipline, each sport relies on the support governing body or federations they get, but beside of that, it's quite limited. So it's kind of tough.
Yeah, very tough. It's very tough. And the things that you're mentioning, like in concept, sound really nice. And as you know, as we've talked about, and you just said this in a way, just because it's available doesn't mean it's available to all, and it doesn't mean that it's available enough. And so I think the need for broader support, individual support, all of that still for sure exists. I do think things are evolving, right? I mean, and it depends how you think about support. So I'll give maybe a non-traditional answer, which is, can my employer be flexible enough with me where they allow me to make sure that I travel to have competition?
Right.
So I think, to your point, it can show up in way of sponsorship. I think it's also, what are those creative ways that one, athletes can look into, but two, the employers out there, is just keeping with that example, can also support. So I think more of that is popping up, but you're right, it's still very, very much a need.
Yeah, indeed. Carlee, you mentioned local programs acting as equity engines. Can you unpack that?
For sure. I think that, right, we've talked a little, well, not a little bit, a lot about, like, what is adaptive sports and what does that mean? In some cases, it's the angle of the elite side of things, but on other angles, which is the much broader reach and impact, are the things in our communities. And today, if you think about what's in your backyard, a playground, a sports arena, a program that's offered to the public, if you just take inventory and look at it and say, who are these programs serving and who are they for? I would venture to guess the majority of them are able-bodied folks. And in some cases, perhaps, right, you can be an adaptive sport athlete and make it into an able-bodied program, but to have that overtism of inclusion or to the equity of, like, hey, it's here, and by the way, it could be included with everything else, I think we still have a lot of room to grow. So I think it's everything from programs to accessibility within different spaces. I live in an area of the city where we happen to have one playground that has some accessibility options to it. And I wonder, like, well, what about the others? And things like that are so simple, right? It's just about, like, making, like, as simple as, like, a wider space, or like the ground that the playground is built on. We're picking on playgrounds, but I think it extends to many, many things. So I think that in communities, and anyone that serves in a community, we all live in communities. I think these are the voices that we can bring to the table to say, it's just about small things to raise the equity bar where everybody can have accessibility and be able to play, participate, grow, have fun, is widely important. So that's what when I talk about, maybe engine for equity, when we think about adaptive sports, there's just so many ways to make it equitable. It's about getting it in the conversation and pursue as as a human and as a community.
Mm-hmm. And throughout your work, do you raise issues? Do you talk with the decision makers within the local governments in charge of infrastructure, in charge of urbanization, to make sure that mobility, access, simple stuff like, for example, bathrooms for adaptive sport and general public as well?
For me, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of different ways people can get involved in, as we've talked about, their community, right? It could be, you're asking me about what's the voice. I think you also mentioned employer. I think those are two easy ways people can get involved. For me, how that has translated, certainly at work. I work at Hyatt Hotels, and one of the conversations that we're having or try and continue to have is, how do you make hotels more accessible? Where do you have options for that? I mentioned my work with Kennedy Krieger Institute.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a community talking about the programs that they have, trying to get other employers, by that I mean through my friends, involved in how they can support, both in whether it be financial support, programmatic support, volunteer support. Those are all ways. I think you and I are right now an example of having conversation, right? We're bringing to bear some opportunities. Now other people can engage. I think that's a conversation point. And also for me, I'm involved in the community. I work in Baltimore in our workforce development board. I just started, so we haven't gotten here yet. But I think when you talk about employers, right, there's a lot of different options for funding, for program opportunity, for hiring differently, for including programs where people can onboard and be successful in their roles in different ways. Now I'm talking about disabilities in a much broader way. But I think those are all ways that I've been able to tap in. And really, it's also taking time. So I also, as people are listening and they're thinking about what they can do, I named a bunch of stuff. It took me time to get here, but I think it starts as simple as the conversation. Mm-hmm. It's about that, maybe the neighborhood meeting that's happening next week where they're getting approval for the next basketball court. It's the nonprofit event that you're going to, and they're looking for specific programmatic support. Well, where are you putting your dollars behind? Because is it behind something that maybe that can be inclusive in the disability space? Yeah. So those are just a couple of ways to start.
Mm. And do you believe to improve and to scale your program, the first priority is funding, or are there other important segments?
I think opportunity. What are we looking to solve for? What are the story? Who are the people that it matters to and for? And so the reason why I bring that up is because let's use USA Volleyball, for example, right? Mm-hmm. Like if I want to get more people involved in the sport here in Baltimore, maybe I want to start with the person that I know down the street that is really, really into the sport. They've been playing volleyball. They're starting to get into sitting volleyball, and they want to get active and be able to move into the pipeline, but they don't have the funding to support going to some of the camps. Well, maybe I start with my neighborhood. Hey, how have we thought about supporting the person that we know down the road to get them going? I mentioned this because people can connect. They can connect to the story, to the purpose. They can see themselves a part of the journey and the support. That's why I go back to what are we trying to solve for? And then to your point, how do you get donors, support, time? And by the way, time is important. Volunteering is important. All these ways to contribute. But starting with that opportunity is where I think you start to move hearts and minds and get people supporting. Otherwise, I think you're fundraising on a concept, right? Something that perhaps isn't tangible. They're wondering where does this go? Am I being impactful with where I'm, contributing? So start with purpose in mind. Yeah. What are you trying to solve for? Who's the person? What's the thing? What's your community of the future? Yeah. These are all important questions.
Yeah. You mentioned at the beginning that the Paris Olympics and Paralympic, they were a success. Are we doing enough to elevate Paralympic and adaptive sports in mainstream coverage?
I think we could be doing more, for sure. You heard me earlier say that we've come a long way, and I think we have a long way to go. It starts, though, with continued exposure, finding athlete stories that connect with people, finding sports that connect with people. Paralympic Games, it's global, right? And so in every country, we have different sports that are also, more popular than others, right? Yeah. In the United States, things like football, basketball, volleyball are big for us. Just to name a few. In India, right, you have, oh my gosh, cricket is an example. I love that sport. I want to see more of that here. What, just as an example, in Australia, Australia rules football, rugby, these types of things. Not to say we don't have those sports in the United States, they're just not as popular. Why do I go down this path? Because I think that that's where the Paralympic Games or the related sports can also grow or tap into broader media coverage. Like, what is the interest of the area? Basically, your consumer. How do we find more channels to get exposure to that? How do athletes also use their brand and their story to connect with others? I think these are all really amazing opportunities. And by the way, they're not new now. I think they're just coming around in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the world is in a different consumption place around diversity of sport, right? Seeing more than just maybe the thing that I grew up with. And that's incredible. So for sure, I think there's more that we could be doing. I think social, I think very different, like when in the streaming space that we've now been tapping into, there's more options there. So for sure, there's more we could be doing. I think this is maybe where you can get local opportunity too. If you have an athlete, let's not even talk about volleyball, any sport that's coming from your space, how are you amplifying their story and their competitions? There's so many ways to tap into competition to be able to show them along the way.
And do you think, Carlee, and here it's a suggestion, and I would love to get your take on this. Imagine the IOC, the Olympic International Committee, will switch the Paralympic Games start before the winter or summer. They start before. Do you think that will boost or will elevate the coverage more? The reason I'm telling you this, it's a question I keep asking everyone, all my colleagues, folks, everyone, because we are all hooked. It doesn't matter, winter or Olympic Games. We are all waiting there for our team, for our nation, for our favorite sport and stuff like that. And it's quite long. It's 10 days, 15 days non-stop, and you switch from one channel to another, And the minute it's over, and the closing ceremony, it's done. I feel like Paralympics, it's secondary. It's not important. And I say that and I measure exactly what I'm saying, And I keep asking, if we switch, what do you think?
I think it's a good question. I would love to have someone on the games operations side kind of
just to keep to build the hype, just to build the momentum and to build the hype. And to get everyone, everyone support, because look, and for the listeners, the Paralympic athletes, they work twice as hard to get there, to be at that level of competition. And God knows how tough it is to compete and to defend the title or to go for a record or whatever. It doesn't matter what sport, They don't have the same opportunity. And here I'm realistic about what I'm saying in terms of when I say opportunity, mainly financial opportunity, sponsorship and stuff like that. They have lesser exposure in terms of viewership. And since the past, let's say 2 decades, we've seen a big improvement.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
In terms of recognition, I believe they need more. And maybe one of the solutions is to start with the Paralympic sports.
No, I hear you. I mean, listen, that's why we're here. We're like amplifying and having conversation. And I think the athletes are incredible. To your question about the pre or post, I brought up the ops part just because I'm a nerd and I love the game, like the games as a whole, Olympic Games, Paralympic Games. So I would just be nerdy to tell me about the operation decision for this. I'm going to go with, do you want to be the pre-party or the post-party is maybe like the way to think about that. So I love what you're saying, which is maybe you're ramping into the Olympic Games and maybe you're pivoting from the Olympic Games. I think maybe I'm going to go bigger picture, which is besides pre or post party, which is just where do they get on equal footing? You asked earlier about the growing the games and the sports, and I'd love to see a vision where we aren't even talking about before or after. We're just like, when are you catching the Paralympic Games? When are you catching the Olympic Games? And it's really, they're just on equal footing in terms of impact, visibility, etc. So maybe I'm going to leave with like the big hope.
Mm-hmm.
But to your question, it's a good one. It's a fun one. I think what I will say that I saw a lot about this year, and I'd be curious if this connected with you. You had there was kind of campaigning around like Paralympic athletes being like, "We got this now, Paris, we're taking over." So I kind of like the takeover feel too. Like,
Yeah.
all right, you've had your time, we're in now. But underneath that all, I do want to share what is so incredible about the broad Olympic Paralympic movement is the purpose of what we are there for, which is elite competition, connecting around the world. And so even in that nod of we got it now, right, it's about camaraderie, right? It's about athletes coming to the most high level of their sport and competing for something that they've been in many cases working their entire lives for. So I just hope one day it continues to grow and they have as much visibility and impact as the other.
Yeah. Paris last summer, they really pushed the bar. And I'm really looking forward for LA 2028.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm with you.
It's going to be hot. For sure.
It'll be warm, but
It's going to be warm. Yeah.
LA's got some beaches. It is the summer games after all.
It is.
But,
it is.
They're going to, I mean, speak of a party, they'll put out a party. That's for sure.
They will. For sure. Yeah. Carlee, you worked in spaces where the infrastructure didn't exist. What did you learn?
I think where infrastructure doesn't exist, it can feel overwhelming. So I think it just goes back to what's your first step, your second step, your third step. Who are the good people you can bring around with you that can help you take that third, fourth, fifth, sixth step? The other people that can join, that can take the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th step. So it comes down to one step at a time. But I'm also going to go back to, it also starts with like, what are you there for? What are you building infrastructure around? And I'll give an example where we've been having a lot of conversations about back to sitting volleyball, how to continue to grow the game and have more consistent elite training opportunities, which could come down to a regional model. Maybe it's tapping into different aspects of programs that are around the country, right? Still yet to be seen. And so while that's not totally without infrastructure, you are starting from okay, we have a need. We want to continue to have athletes in the gym who can train and raise the bar, right? So we have a vision for that. And then what's step one? Well, where can we find a space? Step two, who can help coach? Step three, how do we set it up? How do we get people there? This is where you begin. And I firmly believe it comes with passionate people. I think, you and I are talking about adaptive sports and community. All of these things have huge purpose that people can really connect with. And so I love that. So anything you asked about infrastructure, well, what about like infrastructure gets built with the heart that fuels it. And so that all has to do with the people and the mission that you're on. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. What's one organization or program that's getting it right when it comes to inclusion?
Yeah, I think, well, one you've heard me mention, Kennedy Krieger Institute. I think they're getting it right. I'll bring in a new one, which is an organization called Move United, located in the United States. They're in the game. We also talked about equity earlier. They're trying to really ensure that communities, every community in the United States has access to some sort of physical fitness accessibility. So that could be a program, that could be a space, and they're out there doing it every single day. So I think that's an organization that is trying to make moves in that space, and it's really, really cool. And by the way, if people are sitting in communities and thinking about what they can do, check out Move United, because I think the model that they're running on is really incredible and impactful for that matter.
Great. What's your vision for this movement in the next 5 or 10 years?
Ooh, I think we've touched on a few of these. Yeah. I think, though, but I'm going to highlight them. I think growth of adaptive sports and accessibility in sport programming and communities, growth of that. And it's not even just targeted to only folks that require adaptive sports, but I would love to, back to where we started. I would love to see goalball in the YMCA public opportunity in Baltimore, Maryland. And I'd love to see all kinds of people participating because it's just a fun sport. It allows someone who has visual impairment to participate, but it can be, you and I can go, we can also engage. So one, I'd love to see that. Two, I'd love to see, maybe we'll go back to Move United's mission. And I'm going to extend beyond their mission in the United States, but around the world, that we have increased accessibility in spaces and places where people can go participate. And then I think the other thing you and I have been talking about is the Paralympic Games and adaptive sports movement, that elite sports continues to grow. Athletes have additional sponsorships and monetary support in their pursuit of their dreams. And that they're both the big party, right? We're on the even playing field. Maybe that's our 10-year goal in your question, but I'd love to just continue to see those growth opportunities. And all of that fueled with, right, we're in the United States, we're big brand people. So maybe I'm going to start to see more T-shirts and brands that are fueled through our merch fueled by our adaptive sports athletes. So
more merch, better it is.
I say that with a smile.
Yes,
but hopefully the point is heard that it's really about like our community's accessibility, health,
right?
Building friendships, having lasting memories, living longer lives. Like these are the things that ultimately we're talking about. This whole conversation is really about that.
When it comes to, we touched on that earlier. When it comes to policymakers, could be federation or could be the National Olympic Committee in the US or anywhere else. What's one policy, Carlee, you would like to see or investment that could move the needle?
It's a very good question.
Because you know the challenges, you are there with athletes, you know what they're dealing with on a daily basis, not only infrastructure.
I'm gonna go with there's a quote out there which is with what you expect is what you should inspect. And so perhaps not a specific policy, but when you think about the disbursement of funds, allocation of types of programming, I'd love to see that there's more inspection. In other words, like data or quotas, things of that nature that have to do with the inclusion of adaptability, inclusion of disabilities, to continue to push that conversation forward. I think it's hard to, in big policy, sort of put down one thing that works for all. But I think if we're inspecting what we expect, which is more accessibility and inclusion, we should have policies that support that, bringing that to life. Because I think that's the way that we support growth and development.
Yeah. What gives you hope right now?
I just think we're in such a good place to continue to have this type of valuable conversation about what we can all be doing more of. I think it's about understanding more than we ever have, right? The idea, let's use the term disability around, things are visible, invisible, and that's never been understood more today than ever. But extension of that, opening up more and more program opportunities, investment opportunities, growth opportunities. So what gives me hope is that we're having these conversations more than we ever have. You're seeing change, you're seeing impact. And while we have more to go, lots more to go, we've talked a lot about just taking that one step, and we've been taking leaps at this point. But I am hopeful for even more to come because we're talking about connection and health and play. And I think we can always do more of that.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful for that. I'm hopeful for a connected, small, medium, and big community of the future that's around adaptive sports and people enjoying and taking part.
Yeah. Great.
What about you? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
I'd love to see more recognition when it comes to Paralympic and when it comes to, it doesn't matter which sport. I want to see more recognition. I want to see more support. I want to see more media coverage,
Yes.
because I'm there. I know the ins and out of the sports industry, and I know. Look, Carlee, when you think about it, our industry is valued around 650 billion. With 140 million active participants worldwide. That include all sports, actually. And it's one of
Mm,
the fastest growing
mm,
business, because at the end of the day it's a business. But I want to
mhm.
see more recognition, because throughout my career I met many Paralympians and athletes in various sports, and I see the struggle. I see, and they work hard. They work really really hard.
For
One of
sure.
the main There is two main issues, which is infrastructure and mainly mobility. you know Simple things, just simple things, where sometimes are not there. Depend which country you are, because these guys, they have to travel a lot to compete around the world. And the financial aspect, we don't talk about
Mm,
it a lot. I don't know why. Maybe we are ashamed. I don't know why we don't talk about this aspect a lot.
mm,
And I want to see them thriving like any other normal athlete. And I say normal athlete, and I measure my words carefully, because that's what it is. Because when you talk about inclusion, it's not only about male and female sports and male sports, but as well within this category of athletes. And when I look at, for example, initiatives like Invictus Games, not sure if you are
yep.
familiar with
Yep.
it, which is a fantastic initiative.
It's
Uh,
amazing.
it is amazing. I hope it will continue, because again, it's a recognition for war veterans that sacrifice a lot for their countries. And then coming together, and exactly what you said earlier, the power of sport. When you are in the arena, when you are in the opening ceremony, closing ceremony, in the Olympic Games or major sporting event, it's the power of sport is to connect people. Yeah, I fully agree with you. What gives me hope, because what I seen in the last Summer Olympics in Paris, that was amazing. That was really, really amazing. Not
It was
only from
very,
the competition standpoint, but from all level. And although Paris Olympics, they came under so much criticism, but it was fantastic. And I'm looking forward to see LA, how they're gonna measure up to Paris, because prior Paris, I think before COVID, London 2012 was a successful games. Sydney Olympics as well. So yeah, but going back to the main question, what gives me hope is to see more investment, more recognitions from all stakeholders, including major sponsors, you know, to support these athletes. So yeah.
absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more on so many of those fronts. And I think I'll be because you said it, which is the financial part doesn't get talked about it enough, so I'm going to double down on sponsorship, getting people involved from a financial backing
Mm,
and support perspective. I think is a great opportunity, and that can exist in individuals, groups,
mm,
communities, companies, businesses,
mm.
governments. Right,
And
there is a long list
there is
of
a
area
long
of
list, yeah.
opportunity.
And I like the community aspect. And you said you have a fantastic community support. The entire community come together basically to celebrate, these athletes, to celebrate their involvement in various sports. But major sponsors, not here, I'm not talking about donors, but mainly brands. They should
Mhm.
do more.
And if you've been around the sports, you also know this. Even if we just look at the Olympic Games, there's still a media cycle. Even in it tends to heavyweight towards like the 3/4 mark of the Olympic Games, right? So there is a big, push at the start, but right, you have really competition or people watching. And a lot of that just comes down to, is this the gold medal match or not the gold medal match? And by the way, is this the biggest sport in my country or not the biggest sport in my country? So I think across the spectrum of, we'll just call it elite sport, I think we have elevation to go. You named a few countries, right? And their visibility and accessibility, and therefore broadcasting. Sports, right? The things that are maybe like the primetime sport in a country or in the world, are they getting the airtime, visibility, and conversation? Back to where we've been spending our time, the Paralympic Games, are they getting the sponsorship, visibility, broadcasting? that sits there. So I think the spectrum is wide in the point of what you're mentioning, and I think but where we can all have opportunity to lean in, and where I think what we're both saying is inviting media and sponsorships to engage, because there's huge power in that. And if we're just talking in business, in the United States, from a consumer perspective, 1 in 4 adult Americans have a disability. You have a huge amount of the country to tap into just from I have a connected story, let alone my friend or my own personal interest in these things. So the market is there. Yeah. It's a matter of, I think, organizations and media finding ways to tap into that, which is just to highlight where we've seen success. Like women's sports is starting to finally have its show on the stage. How do we use that model and be like, oh, everyone was right, we could tap into that market and make money? I think we could do that for adaptive sports as well. We just need those first couple and not even first couple. We have a first couple, continued couple of big organizations and media outlets who are willing to sign up and join.
Yeah. Absolutely. You're listening to the Pre-Zero Sports Talk. For more conversations on sports leadership, faith, performance, and innovation from Sweden to the world, visit prezerosportstalk.com. Now it's time for our lightning round. Ready for speedy Q&A?
Let's go.
What's a lesson you've learned from sport that applied to life?
Take the big first step. There's a lot of things we do in life that is scary, we don't know how to do, but we'll get the metaphorical gym. Just begin. There's a lot of really positive that yields from a yes.
Mm-hmm. A piece of advice you wish you'd received earlier in your career?
Don't take things so seriously. I'm a go-getter. I like getting things done. I like doing things well. I think as much as I bring fun to the table, I'm also pretty serious, and I have high expectations for myself. I don't need that in all areas. I could have, maybe somebody did tell me that. Maybe I didn't hear it, but I will go with that one.
Yeah. Coffee, tea, or something else?
Dessert coffee. I'm not an everyday coffee drinker, but if I'm traveling or want something special, that's what I'll get.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
Evening owl, night owl.
Night owl, yeah. If you could have a dinner with a historical figure, who would it be and why?
This is a good one. Historical figure. This just came to Martin Luther King Jr. It just popped into my head. I'm close to Washington, D.C. I think so many conversation points in his life, truly important. So I'm gonna go with that. I'm okay.
Okay. One place you'd love to visit or revisit?
Ooh. Everyone should know about a lightning round, and you should know this too. I always struggle on this single answer. So a million places come to mind because the world is so big. I think that Laos, Cambodia, that area of the world is somewhere I've been targeting for a bit. Would love to get out there.
Favorite sport to watch beside of volleyball, of course?
I love the Winter Games.
Any particular sport?
I was thinking I'm going to go with either downhill skiing or bobsled. There's just something about those noises on the ice and on the snow.
So let's stick with downhill. Who's your favorite all-time downhill skier?
Okay, I don't know if this is all-time, but I have to say Lindsey Vonn is incredible. She is making a comeback that no one thought she could at this age. And I love a comeback story.
Yeah.
I used to work at Under Armour. She's a big Under Armour athlete, so I have connection there. But good for her. I mean, come on, you got to appreciate.
She's great. She's great.
Work there.
Yeah, fully agree with you. Yeah, a quote or a mantra that keeps you grounded.
A quote. I'm gonna go with "It's not where, but who you're with that really matters." It's a Dave Matthews Band quote. And it keeps me grounded just because for me, it always comes back to the people that I'm with and around in life that get me through the good times, the hard times, but also are the inspiration for things that I do that are new. and I just love people and and what we all bring to one another in our lives. So that's what keeps me grounded.
Best way to unwind after a long day or a long week?
After a long day or a long week, I love the moment where you just get to sit down and you're like, yes, we made it. But in terms of unwinding, a good dinner with friends.
Yeah.
New food, the laughter, the connection around the table. That probably is peak.
Yeah.
Peak appreciation and love.
Yeah. And lastly, Carlee, a piece of advice or wisdom to our listeners on any topic.
We talked a lot about community. I think community shows up in a lot of ways. So maybe my one piece of advice is, if you're not involved in your community, what's one way that you can get involved? And community can be as small as your friend, as your neighbor next door, as big as a 60,000 person arena where a sport is held. But what are you passionate about? Where do you see opportunity? And where can you get in the conversation and take that first step? It's so fulfilling in so many ways. And I couldn't encourage people more than to be a part of their communities that they live, work, or serve in.
Carlee Wolfe, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a fun conversation, and I just really, really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you.
You're welcome. We want to thank you for joining our show. If you enjoyed this episode, we have more for you. You can now watch the entire episode on our YouTube and Spotify channels. While you're here, subscribe and don't forget to tap the bell. Visit prezerosportstalk.com to explore more conversations on sports, leadership, faith, performance, and innovation. From Sweden to the world. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and make a difference. We'll see you soon. Take care.